They laughed when the poor Mexican trainer brought his old horse to the prestigious Texas arena. But when the music started, the entire crowd rose to their feet in silence. Miguel Ramirez woke before the sun, when the Texas sky still cradled stars like distant memories of home. At 45, his body carried the weight of 2 decades working the stables and farms of South Texas, each muscle a testament to labor that began before dawn and ended long after dusk. He sat on the edge of his worn mattress, rubbing calloused hands over his face, feeling the lines that had deepened there, maps of a journey that had carried him far from Oaxaca. Outside his trailer window, the vast Whitaker Ranch sprawled in pre-dawn darkness, its main house a distant glow of privilege on the hill. Miguel's home, if the aging trailer tucked behind the equipment shed could be called that, creaked in the gentle morning breeze. The space was sparse but meticulously clean. A bed, a small table with 2 chairs, a kitchenette with a hot plate, and in the corner, propped carefully against the wall, his father's guitar, its wood worn smooth by generations of hands. Miguel's morning ritual never varied. He boiled water on the hot plate, carefully measuring coffee grounds into a small metal pot, his one daily luxury. The rich aroma filled the confined space, and as he poured the steaming liquid into a chipped mug, his mind drifted back to mornings in Oaxaca, to his father brewing coffee over an open fire. Los caballos tienen memoria en el alma, mijo, his father's voice echoed in his memory. Horses have memory in their soul, son. Guillermo Ramirez had been a respected charro in their village, known for his gentle way with even the most difficult horses. Miguel had inherited that gift, along with his father's hands and quiet dignity. The memory of his father's death still came to him in dreams sometimes. Guillermo, walking home along a dusty road after a long day's work, struck by a truck whose driver never stopped. Miguel had been 12 then, suddenly the man of the house with 3 younger sisters and a mother who worked her fingers raw, washing other people's clothes. The guitar and his father's wisdom about horses were all Guillermo had left him. That, and the dream of something better that had carried Miguel across the border at 25, a dream that had faded but never quite disappeared under the Texas sun. Miguel drained his coffee and stepped outside. The stars were beginning to fade as he walked toward the stables, his boots crunching on gravel. He carried nothing but a small lunch packed by his own hands, tortillas, beans, a single apple, and the weight of responsibility for those who depended on him back home. Every month he sent almost all his modest wages to his aging mother and sisters in Oaxaca, keeping only what he needed for basic necessities. At the main stable, lights were already on. Miguel slipped inside, the familiar smell of hay, manure, and horse sweat enveloping him like an old blanket. He grabbed a pitchfork and began the morning cleaning, moving with the efficiency of long practice. Ramirez! The booming voice of Clint Whitaker filled the stable an hour later. The ranch owner stood in the doorway, an imposing figure in custom boots and a Stetson that probably cost more than Miguel earned in a month. I want the jumping arena prepared for my daughter's practice this afternoon, and make sure those new saddles are properly oiled before they're used. Yes, sir, Miguel replied, keeping his eyes lowered in the way he'd learned kept confrontations to a minimum. And remember what I always say, Whitaker continued, his voice carrying to the Latino workers who had arrived to begin their day. In nature, only the strong survive. On my ranch, only champions stay. With that proclamation delivered, Whitaker turned and left, boots clicking authoritatively on the concrete floor. The stable hands exchanged glances but said nothing until the sound of his truck engine faded. El patrón está de buen humor hoy, Ernesto, a young man from Chiapas, muttered sarcastically. The boss is in a good mood today. Miguel simply nodded and returned to his work. He had learned long ago that survival depended on invisibility. Do your job, stay out of the way, never give them a reason to notice you. The day passed as most did, in the rhythm of physical labor that left little time for thought. It was only during lunch, sitting alone in the shade of an old oak tree, that Miguel allowed himself to rest. He ate slowly, savoring each bite, watching the expensive horses in the paddocks, thoroughbreds and quarter horses worth more than he would earn in a lifetime. Late afternoon brought rain clouds and a buzz of excitement among the workers. Miguel overheard snippets of conversation as he repaired a section of fencing near the equipment shed. "They say it's wild, completely untamable," one of the younger hands was saying. "Whitaker paid a fortune for it," Ernesto replied. "A Mustang from Wyoming, pure black, like the devil himself." Miguel's hands stilled on the fence wire. Wild Mustangs were rare now, most herds managed or eliminated by the Bureau of Land Management. A truly wild horse was something special. "What are they saying about this Mustang?" Miguel asked, approaching the small group. Ernesto turned to him, lowering his voice. "They call him Thunder. Captured after surviving a forest fire. Has the scars to prove it. 3 trainers have tried to break him. One ended up with broken ribs, another with a concussion." "And Whitaker bought him anyway?" Miguel asked. "You know the boss," another worker chimed in. "He loves a challenge. Plus, imagine the prestige if Whitaker Ranch tames the untamable." "Where is the horse now?" Miguel couldn't help asking. "Isolation stable by the creek," Ernesto said. "Whitaker gave Brady 2 weeks to break him after that." He drew a finger across his throat. Miguel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the gathering rain. The isolation stable was where horses were sent as a last resort, either to recover from illness or to be broken through methods Miguel had witnessed but never participated in. Methods that involved pain, fear, and domination. 2 weeks, he murmured. "That's what the boss said," Ernesto confirmed. "Break him or butcher him." That night, Miguel couldn't sleep. Rain pattered on the metal roof of his trailer, a gentle counterpoint to his troubled thoughts. He thought of his father, of how Guillermo had never used force with horses, how he'd said that understanding was the key, not domination. Just after midnight, Miguel sat up in bed. The rain had stopped, and moonlight streamed through his small window. Without fully deciding to do so, he pulled on his boots and a jacket. Quietly, he took his father's guitar from its place against the wall and stepped outside. The ranch was silent under the full moon, its buildings silvered in ghostly light. Miguel moved carefully, avoiding the security lights, staying in shadows. The isolation stable was a quarter mile from the main compound, a small, sturdy building set apart from the others. As he approached, Miguel could hear movement inside, the heavy thud of hooves against wood, the snort of a frightened animal. He paused at the stable door, listening to the Mustang's distress. Slowly, Miguel opened the door. The interior was dark except for a single security light that cast more shadows than illumination. In the largest stall at the far end, he could make out the shape of the horse, larger than he'd expected, powerful muscles moving under a coat as black as midnight. Thunder sensed his presence immediately. The Mustang's head came up, eyes reflecting the dim light like flames. He struck the stall door violently with his front hooves, wood splintering under the impact. Miguel didn't approach. Instead, he sat down on an overturned feed bucket several yards away, where the horse could see him clearly. For long minutes, he simply sat in silence, letting Thunder grow accustomed to his presence. The Mustang continued to move restlessly, striking occasionally at the stall door, but his eyes never left Miguel. There was intelligence in that gaze, and fear, and something else, a wildness that spoke of open skies and unbounded spaces. Slowly, Miguel brought the guitar to his lap. The first note he played was soft, barely audible above Thunder's movements. The horse's ears flicked forward in surprise, then back in suspicion. Miguel continued, playing a melody his father had taught him, one meant to soothe nervous colts. The music filled the small stable, echoing softly off the wooden walls. Miguel kept his movements minimal, his eyes lowered, offering no threat. As he played, he began to speak softly in Spanish, his voice blending with the guitar. "My father would have admired you," he said. He believed that wild things should remain wild at heart, even when they must live among men. Thunder's movements grew less frantic. The Mustang still watched Miguel warily, but the violent striking at the stall door had ceased. "I crossed a border too," Miguel continued, "left one life behind for another. It's not easy being taken from your home, is it? He shifted the melody slightly to another song his father had played, one about mountains and open skies. As he played, Miguel studied the Mustang more carefully. Even in the dim light, he could see the scars on Thunder's flanks and legs, pale marks against the dark coat, testament to the fire he'd survived. "You've known pain," Miguel murmured, "but you're still here, still fighting." For nearly an hour, Miguel sat and played, speaking occasionally in his native tongue about his home in Oaxaca, about his father's work with horses, about the wide Wyoming plains he'd never seen but imagined as Thunder's original home. Gradually, the Mustang grew still. His breathing slowed, and though he remained alert, the panic had left his eyes. When Miguel finally looked directly at the horse, he found Thunder watching him with intensity, nostrils flared, taking in his scent. "También estás solo, ¿verdad?" Miguel whispered. "You're alone too, aren't you?" Something passed between them in that moment. A recognition, perhaps, of shared isolation. Miguel felt it like a current in the air, a connection as tangible as a touch. When the eastern sky began to lighten with approaching dawn, Miguel carefully returned his guitar to its case. He stood slowly, making no sudden movements. "I'll come back tomorrow," he promised softly, before slipping out of the stable and into the gray morning light. All through the day, as Miguel went about his regular duties, his mind kept returning to the Mustang. There was something about Thunder that called to him. Not just the horse's beauty or power, but the defiance in those eyes, the will that refused to be broken. That night, Miguel returned to the isolation stable, and the next night as well. Each time he sat at the same distance, played his guitar, and spoke in Spanish about whatever came to mind. Thunder grew calmer with each visit, watching Miguel with increasing curiosity rather than fear. On the fourth night, something changed. When Miguel entered the stable, guitar in hand, the black Mustang was not pacing or striking at the walls. Instead, Thunder stood quietly at the front of his stall, head held high, watching the door as if he had been waiting. When Miguel sat in his usual place and began to play, Thunder moved closer to the stall door than he ever had before. The Mustang's ears were forward, focused entirely on the music and the man. For the first time, Miguel felt that Thunder wasn't merely tolerating his presence, he was welcoming it. When Miguel returned on the fifth night, he found Thunder waiting silently by the stall door, as if he had spent the entire day anticipating the moment when the quiet man with the guitar would return. When Miguel returned on the fifth night, he found Thunder waiting silently by the stall door, as if he had spent the entire day anticipating the moment when the quiet man with the guitar would return. The Mustang's ears perked forward, his dark eyes tracking Miguel's movements with newfound interest rather than fear. In that moment, Miguel felt a shift between them, the beginning of something that transcended the usual relationship between man and horse. The next morning, Miguel moved with renewed purpose through his chores. He mucked stalls with efficient precision, filled water troughs without spilling a drop, and groomed the show horses with such attention that even Brady Wilson, Whitaker's head trainer, grunted something that might have been approval as he passed. Around midday, Miguel paused his work when he heard a commotion from the training pen. Leaning his pitchfork against a stall, he walked toward the sound, staying in the shadows of the barn's overhang. What he saw made his stomach tighten. Brady had Thunder in the round pen, the Mustang's magnificent black coat lathered with sweat. The trainer circled the horse with a long whip, cracking it near Thunder's hind legs whenever the animal slowed. Two ranch hands stood at the perimeter, one holding a lasso, the other a restraint pole. "Move, you devil!" Brady shouted, snapping the whip again. Thunder's eyes rolled white with panic as he galloped frantically around the pen. Miguel's hands clenched into fists at his sides. This was the traditional way. Exhaust the animal, break its spirit, teach it that resistance meant pain. It was a method as old as domestication itself, but watching it applied to Thunder felt like witnessing a crime. "Wear him down," Brady instructed the hands. "Once he's exhausted, we'll get the saddle on him." Miguel forced himself to turn away. Interfering would accomplish nothing except getting himself fired, or worse, deported. He returned to his chores, but the image of Thunder's panic stayed with him, a splinter beneath his skin. Later that afternoon, as Miguel was repairing a broken fence post, he noticed Brady limping heavily toward the main house, his shirt torn and a darkening bruise forming on his cheek. "The devil threw him," Ernesto whispered, appearing at Miguel's side. "Reared up and came down fighting. Brady barely got out of the pen." "And Thunder?" Miguel asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. "Back in isolation. Whitaker was furious. Said Brady has one more chance tomorrow, then it's the slaughterhouse." That evening, the sky turned the color of a fresh bruise as Miguel approached the isolation stable. He moved more cautiously than before, aware that Thunder might be more agitated after the day's trauma. Opening the door, he braced himself for the sound of hooves striking wood. Instead, he found silence. Thunder stood at the back of his stall, head lowered, sides still heaving slightly. When the Mustang raised his eyes to Miguel, there was something new there. Not just fear or defiance, but a profound wariness, as if the day's events had confirmed everything the horse suspected about humans. Miguel sat in his usual spot, but didn't immediately reach for his guitar. Instead, he simply breathed, letting Thunder adjust to his presence. After several minutes, he began to speak, his voice softer than usual. "I saw what they did to you today," he said in Spanish. "That is not my way. It was not my father's way." Thunder's ears flicked toward the sound of Miguel's voice, but he remained at the back of the stall. "My father said force teaches nothing but fear," Miguel continued, "and fear is a poor foundation for trust." Slowly, he reached for his guitar and began to play. Not the soothing melody of previous nights, but something sadder, a lament his father had played at funerals and wakes. The minor chords echoed in the small space, giving voice to the sorrow Miguel felt witnessing Thunder's treatment. As he played, Miguel noticed a shadow at the stable door. He continued without pausing, but angled himself slightly to see who was there. Elena Rodriguez, the elderly cook who had worked for the Whitakers for over 30 years, stood watching him with intense dark eyes. Miguel finished the melody before acknowledging her. "Buenas noches, Doña Elena." "So it's true," she said, entering the stable. "The other said you've been coming here at night." Miguel set his guitar aside. "I'm not interfering with his training." Elena snorted. "Training? Is that what they call it?" She moved closer, studying Thunder with experienced eyes. "Brady says this one is possessed by demons, but I see only fear and pain." "He's wild," Miguel said simply. "He doesn't understand what they want from him." Elena looked at Miguel thoughtfully. "And you think you can make him understand?" "Not me." Miguel shook his head. "He must choose to understand. I just sit with him, that's all." The older woman was silent for a long moment. Then she reached into the pocket of her apron and pulled out 2 apples. "Animals know who sees them truly," she said, placing the apples on a nearby shelf. "My father was a yeguero in Jalisco. He could gentle a mare with just his voice. Perhaps your father taught you something similar, no?" Before Miguel could respond, Elena turned to leave. "I'm too old to report for work with Sunrise. Whatever you're doing here, I didn't see it." The next evening, Miguel found a small basket in his usual spot: apples, carrots, and a jar of molasses. Beside it was a note in Elena's careful handwriting: "For your friend." Night after night, Miguel continued his vigil. Sometimes he played his guitar, sometimes he simply talked, telling Thunder about Oaxaca, about the mountains and valleys of his childhood, about his father's way with horses. Always, he maintained his distance, never attempting to enter the stall or force any interaction. Gradually, Thunder began to approach the front of the stall when Miguel arrived. The Mustang would stand watching him, still wary but no longer panicked. By the 10th night, Thunder would remain at the front of the stall throughout Miguel's visit, ears pricked forward, listening to the music and the soft Spanish words. During the days, Brady's attempts to break Thunder continued, each session ending in frustrated failure. The trainer employed increasingly harsh methods, tighter restraints, a twisted wire bit, spurs that left marks on the Mustang's sides. Each evening, Miguel would find Thunder more withdrawn, the progress of trust eroded by the day's trauma. After 2 weeks of this pattern, Miguel arrived at the stable to find Thunder pacing anxiously, his black coat dark with sweat despite the cool evening. When the Mustang saw Miguel, he stopped his pacing and approached the stall door, nostrils flared, eyes intense. Miguel sat in his usual spot and began to play, watching as Thunder gradually calmed. When the horse was standing quietly, Miguel set his guitar aside and reached for one of Elena's apples. He cut it into quarters with his pocket knife, the sweet scent filling the small space. "Would you like this?" he asked softly, holding a piece in his open palm. Thunder's ears flicked forward with interest, but he didn't approach. "It's good," Miguel continued, taking a small bite from another piece to demonstrate. He extended his hand again, this time a little closer to the stall. The Mustang watched him intently, nostrils working as he caught the apple's scent. For several minutes, neither moved. Then, with careful deliberation, Thunder took a step forward, then another, his neck stretched out, reaching toward Miguel's outstretched hand. Miguel remained perfectly still, his breathing shallow, hardly daring to hope. "No voy a hacerte daño," he whispered. "I won't hurt you." Thunder's breath was warm on Miguel's palm as the horse sniffed the apple piece. Then, with surprising gentleness, the Mustang's lips gathered the fruit from Miguel's hand. Something expanded in Miguel's chest, a feeling too complex to name. Thunder had taken the first step toward trust, had chosen to believe, if only for a moment, that this human might be different from the others. The next morning, Miguel was spreading fresh straw in the main stable when Elena appeared beside him, her face grave. "Whitaker is angry," she said without preamble. "Brady told him the horse is unbreakable. They're talking about calling the slaughterhouse." Miguel's hands stilled on the pitchfork. "When?" "Tomorrow, maybe. Whitaker said he's tired of wasting time and feed on a worthless animal." That night, Miguel approached the isolation stable with a new urgency. The stars overhead seemed colder, more distant than before. He carried his guitar and a bag of Elena's apples, but his mind was filled with calculations and possibilities, none of them promising. Thunder greeted him with a soft nickering sound, the first vocalization the Mustang had offered that wasn't born of fear or anger. The horse came immediately to the stall door, reaching his nose toward Miguel in what was becoming a familiar greeting. Miguel offered an apple piece, which Thunder took gently from his palm. As the horse chewed, Miguel studied him, the powerful muscles, the intelligent eyes, the scars that spoke of survival against impossible odds. "They want to kill you," he said simply in Spanish. "Because you won't submit. Because you remember what freedom feels like." Thunder's dark eyes seemed to hold Miguel's gaze with understanding. The Mustang had lived wild until recently, had known vast skies and open ranges, had run with a herd and made his own decisions. How could such a creature ever accept the bit and saddle willingly? Miguel played his guitar that night with a new intensity, as if trying to compress weeks of patience into a single session. The urgency in his music seemed to communicate itself to Thunder, who remained close to the stall door, attentive to every note. When Miguel finally set the guitar aside, he took a deep breath. The time for patience alone had passed. Now trust must be tested. "I need you to trust me," he said, rising slowly from his seat. "And I need to trust you." Miguel approached the stall door, closer than he had ever come while Thunder was near it. The Mustang's ears flicked back momentarily, but he didn't retreat. Keeping his movements deliberate and smooth, Miguel unlatched the door and swung it open just enough to slip inside. For a breathless moment, man and horse regarded each other in the confined space. Miguel made no move toward Thunder, simply stood with his back against the door, hands open at his sides. The Mustang's nostrils flared as he took in Miguel's scent, his powerful body tense but not threatening. "It's just you and me now," Miguel said softly. He began to hum one of the melodies he'd played often, keeping his voice low and steady. Gradually, he reached into his pocket and withdrew the last apple piece. Extending his arm slowly, he offered it to Thunder. The Mustang regarded the offering, then took a step forward. When he took the apple from Miguel's hand, his whiskers brushed against Miguel's skin, a touch as light as moth wings, but electrifying in its significance. "We're running out of time," Miguel whispered. "I need you to understand that." As if in response, Thunder lowered his head slightly and blew out a soft breath that warmed Miguel's chest. For a long moment, they stood together in the straw-scented darkness, two beings reaching across a divide of species and experience towards something like understanding. When Miguel heard voices approaching the stable, he slipped quickly out of the stall, securing the door behind him. He had barely returned to his usual spot when the stable door opened and Whitaker entered with Brady. "What the hell are you doing in here, Ramirez?" Whitaker's voice cracked like a whip in the quiet space. Miguel stood respectfully. "Just checking on the horse, sir." "That's not your job," Whitaker said, his eyes narrowing. "This animal is worth $50,000. "He's calming down, sir," Miguel ventured. "He just needs time and patience." Whitaker laughed harshly. "Time is money, Mexican, and this horse is trying my patience." He turned to Brady. "One more try tomorrow. If he's not saddle broken by noon, call Martinez at the slaughterhouse." After they left, Miguel approached Thunder's stall once more. The Mustang had retreated to the back corner during the confrontation, but now moved forward again, seeking Miguel's presence. "Lo siento, amigo," Miguel whispered, reaching through the bars to touch Thunder's nose for the first time. "But I won't give up on you." That night, Miguel didn't sleep. A desperate plan was forming in his mind, one that could cost him everything he had worked for, everything he had built over 20 years in this country. But when he thought of Thunder's eyes, of the trust beginning to grow between them, he knew he had no choice. Dawn was still hours away when Miguel returned to his trailer, the weight of his decision settling over him like a physical burden. Sleep would not come. How could it, when tomorrow Thunder might face his final day? He sat at his small table, fingers tracing the worn wood of his father's guitar, and waited for first light with the patience of a man accustomed to having little control over his fate. When the faintest gray touched the eastern horizon, Miguel gathered what he needed: his guitar, an apple from Elena's basket, and courage that felt simultaneously vast and insufficient. The ranch slumbered around him as he made his way to the isolation stable, each step deliberate and final. Thunder was already alert when Miguel opened the stable door, standing at attention as if he too sensed the gravity of this morning. The Mustang's ears pricked forward at Miguel's approach, his powerful body tense but not fearful. "Today is different," Miguel said softly in Spanish, setting his guitar against the wall. He approached Thunder's stall slowly, maintaining eye contact with the horse. "Today, we must trust each other completely." Miguel unlatched the stall door, feeling the weight of 20 years of caution and invisibility fall away with the movement. He swung the door open just enough to slip inside, then closed it behind him. For the first time, nothing separated them. Miguel stood perfectly still, back against the door, hands open at his sides. Thunder's nostrils flared as he assessed this new development, muscles coiled beneath his obsidian coat. The Mustang took one step backward, uncertainty flickering in his dark eyes. "I understand your fear," Miguel continued in his native tongue, voice barely above a whisper. "Men have only brought you pain, but I am not those men." Miguel lowered himself slowly to sit cross-legged on the straw-covered floor, several yards from Thunder. The distance between them seemed both vast and insignificant in the confines of the stall. He reached for his guitar and began to play, choosing a melody more somber than his usual selections. A lament his father had taught him that spoke of mountains and loss and endurance. As the music filled the small space, Miguel sang softly about a black horse that ran free through canyons and valleys, that drank from clear streams and answered to no master but the wind. Thunder's ears remained fixed on Miguel, the Mustang's breathing gradually slowing as the minutes passed. "They took you from your home," Miguel said between verses, as I was taken from mine. Not by force in my case, but by necessity. Still, we both know what it is to long for open spaces that memory preserves, but distance denies. Thunder lowered his head slightly, as if considering Miguel's words. A subtle shift in the horse's posture suggested the first tentative relaxation of vigilance. Miguel set his guitar aside and removed the apple from his pocket. With his small pocket knife, he cut it into quarters, the crisp sound and sweet scent filling the morning air. He placed a piece in his open palm and extended his hand. "No voy a hacerte daño," he murmured. "I won't hurt you." Minutes passed in perfect stillness. Then, with deliberate caution, Thunder took one step forward. Then another. His approach was hesitant but purposeful. Each movement a conscious choice to trust despite every reason not to. When the Mustang's muzzle finally hovered over Miguel's hand, warm breath ghosting across his skin, Miguel remained motionless, hardly daring to breathe. Thunder's lips gently gathered the apple piece, teeth carefully avoiding human flesh. "Good," Miguel whispered, the simple word carrying the weight of profound gratitude. As Thunder chewed, Miguel slowly raised his other hand, letting the horse see and smell it before gently touching the Mustang's jaw. Thunder flinched, but didn't retreat, allowing the contact with wary tolerance that gradually softened into something like acceptance. They remained this way, man seated on straw, horse standing close enough that his muzzle occasionally brushed Miguel's shoulder, as morning light strengthened beyond the stable walls. Miguel offered another apple piece, then another, speaking continuously in low, melodic Spanish about his father, about Oaxaca, about his belief that some spirits were too vast to be contained. The stable door crashed open with sudden violence. Thunder startled, backing away from Miguel with alarm, but remarkably he didn't bolt to the far corner or lash out defensively. Brady Wilson stood in the doorway, his expression morphing from surprise to disbelief as he took in the scene. "What the fuck is this?" he demanded, his voice breaking the fragile peace. Miguel rose slowly, keeping his movements measured for Thunder's benefit. "Mr. Wilson," he said, his accent thickening with tension. "Please, I can show you something." Brady's hand moved instinctively toward the whip on his belt. "You're supposed to be mucking stalls, not playing horse whisperer. Get out of there before that devil kills you." "Please," Miguel repeated, not moving toward the door. "Just watch." Something in Miguel's calm certainty gave Brady pause. The trainer crossed his arms, skepticism radiating from his stance. 2 minutes, then you're fired." Miguel turned back to Thunder, who stood alert but not panicked. He retrieved his guitar and began to play the same melody from earlier, his voice joining the notes in quiet harmony. Thunder's ears flicked forward immediately, recognition visible in his posture. As Miguel played, he took a step toward Thunder, then another. The Mustang remained still, watching him with intelligent eyes that assessed but no longer feared. When Miguel was an arm's length away, he stopped playing but continued humming softly. He extended his hand, palm up, and waited. Thunder lowered his head and pressed his muzzle into Miguel's palm. Brady's sharp intake of breath was audible even across the stable. How did you do that?" he stammered. "No lo hice, Miguel replied, not looking away from Thunder. He chose to trust. Within hours, the news had spread throughout Whitaker Ranch. Stable hands found excuses to pass by the isolation stable, peering through windows to glimpse the Mexican worker who had somehow gentled the untamable Mustang. Elena brought a thermos of coffee and a knowing smile. Ernesto clapped Miguel on the shoulder as they passed in the equipment shed, a gesture of respect between equals. By mid-afternoon, Clint Whitaker himself appeared at the isolation stable, his face unreadable as he watched Miguel sitting calmly on the straw floor, Thunder standing beside him like a sentinel. "What exactly am I looking at here, Ramirez?" Whitaker demanded, his voice carrying the authority of generations of ownership. Before Miguel could answer, Elena stepped forward from the small group of workers who had gathered outside. "A miracle, Mr. Whitaker," she said, her weathered face solemn beneath her gray hair. The kind money can't buy. Whitaker's jaw tightened at the implicit challenge. He strode into the stable, boots loud against the concrete floor. Thunder immediately tensed, moving to stand between Miguel and the approaching threat. Impressive, Whitaker admitted grudgingly, stopping at a respectful distance. But it doesn't change anything. This horse was purchased for competition, not to be some Mexican's pet project. Miguel rose slowly to his feet, one hand resting lightly on Thunder's withers. The touch calmed them both. "He can compete, sir," he said with quiet conviction. "He just needs to be treated with respect." Whitaker laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. "Respect? It's a horse, Ramirez, not a business partner." He studied Thunder with the calculating eye of a man always measuring value. "Still, I didn't pay $50,000 for dog food." A tense silence filled the stable as Whitaker considered. Finally, he nodded once. Decision made. "Fine. You have 1 week to prepare him for the San Antonio Rodeo. If he performs well enough to justify his price tag, I'll consider your methods worth continuing." His eyes narrowed. "If not, you're both finished at Whitaker Ranch. Understood?" "Yes, sir," Miguel replied, his expression carefully neutral despite the impossible timeline. After Whitaker left, the gathered workers dispersed quickly, returning to tasks they'd neglected during the excitement. Only Elena remained, her dark eyes assessing Miguel with concern. "A week is not enough time," she said quietly. Miguel nodded, his hand still resting on Thunder's neck. "I know, but it's the only chance we have." Over the following days, Miguel established a new routine. He arrived at the isolation stable before dawn, worked with Thunder until his regular duties began, then returned during lunch and again after his workday ended. Traditional training methods were discarded entirely. There were no lunging whips, no breaking saddles, no harsh bits or spurs. Instead, Miguel built upon the foundation of trust they'd established. He introduced a light rope halter, allowing Thunder to inspect it thoroughly before ever placing it on the Mustang's head. He taught verbal and musical cues, specific guitar phrases that signaled different requests. A short, ascending melody meant walk forward. A repeated low note meant stop. A particular Spanish folk tune was paired with gentle brushing, teaching Thunder to associate the song with pleasant grooming. Marisol, Elena's daughter, began visiting the ranch on weekends, documenting Thunder's progress with her phone camera. A veterinary student at Texas A&M, she approached the situation with scientific curiosity and emotional investment. "It's like they're having a conversation," she told her mother, reviewing footage of Miguel and Thunder moving in synchronized harmony around the small paddock behind the isolation stable. "I've never seen anything like it." Joe Running Bear, a Comanche man in his 70s who had worked at Whitaker Ranch longer than anyone, became a quiet observer of the training sessions. One evening, as Miguel led Thunder around the paddock using only musical cues, Joe approached the fence. "My people called horses like this one spirits of the wind," he said, his voice carrying the texture of age and wisdom. "They choose their riders, not the other way around." Miguel nodded respectfully. "Your people understood horses better than most." "And understood captivity too," Joe replied, his weathered face solemn. "Both are about choice in the end, choosing to remain despite having the spirit to leave." Not every day brought progress. There were mornings when Thunder seemed to have forgotten the previous day's lessons, when the Mustang retreated into wariness at some unexpected sound or movement. Brady Wilson's occasional appearances particularly triggered setbacks, the horse's memory associating the trainer with pain and fear. One afternoon, Brady insisted on demonstrating his proper methods to a skeptical Whitaker, entering the paddock with a training whip while Miguel was taking a brief lunch break. By the time Miguel returned, Thunder was in a full panic, charging the fence and threatening to injure himself in his desperation. It took hours of patient guitar playing and soft Spanish murmuring before Thunder calmed enough to approach Miguel again, the setback palpable in the Mustang's renewed distrust. That evening, as dark clouds gathered on the horizon and the air grew heavy with impending rain, Miguel remained with Thunder in the isolation stable. Elena brought him dinner, warm tortillas, beans, and her special chili colorado, which he ate sitting cross-legged in the straw while Thunder stood nearby. "How will you be ready in 3 days?" Elena asked, concern evident in her voice. Miguel had no answer that wouldn't sound like false confidence or despair. As night fell, the storm arrived with sudden violence. Rain pounded the stable roof while lightning split the sky with blinding frequency. Thunder grew increasingly agitated with each thunderclap, his eyes rolling white, body trembling with remembered trauma from the forest fire he'd survived. Miguel played his guitar with growing intensity, trying to create a sound barrier between Thunder and the storm's fury. When a particularly close lightning strike illuminated the stable in harsh white light, followed immediately by an explosive crack of thunder, the Mustang reared in panic. Miguel barely had time to move aside, avoiding the powerful hooves by inches. He continued playing, voice raised now in a traditional Mexican canción his father had taught him, a song about finding shelter in the storm. Thunder circled the stall frantically, looking for escape from the memory of fire and the crash of falling trees. When another lightning bolt struck nearby, splintering an old oak just outside the stable, the Mustang dropped to his knees in what seemed like despair. Miguel set his guitar aside and approached the trembling horse, speaking continuously in soothing Spanish. Kneeling beside Thunder, he placed his hand on the Mustang's heaving side, feeling the rapid heartbeat beneath his palm. "You survived before," he murmured. "You'll survive again. We both will." As if understanding, Thunder shifted his position, rising slightly to push his body against Miguel, creating a protective barrier between the man and the stable wall. The Mustang lowered his head, pressing his muzzle gently against Miguel's chest in a gesture that transcended training or domestication. It was acknowledgement between two beings facing fear together. Miguel found himself sliding naturally onto Thunder's back, the movement born not of intention, but necessity, as the Mustang rose to his feet. There was no saddle, no bridle, nothing between them but trust built layer by layer over weeks of patience. For the first time, Miguel sat astride Thunder, his hands resting lightly on the powerful neck, feeling each breath, each heartbeat. The Mustang stood perfectly still, accepting Miguel's weight as if it belonged there, as if together they made a single creature stronger than either alone. They remained this way throughout the storm, man and horse finding in each other a shelter more significant than walls or roof. When lightning illuminated the stable, it revealed them as an ancient tableau of partnership, not dominance and submission, but mutual protection against a hostile world. When Elena arrived early the next morning to check on them, she found Miguel asleep against Thunder's neck, the Mustang standing vigilant guard over his human companion. Thunder's ears flicked toward Elena as she entered, but he made no move to retreat or disturb Miguel's rest. "Dios mío," she whispered, making the sign of the cross. "This is more than training." Elena's words hung in the morning air, a truth both simple and profound. "This is more than training." Miguel stirred at the sound of her voice, the night's exhaustion still heavy in his limbs. Thunder remained perfectly still beneath him, allowing Miguel to regain his bearings without disturbing his rest. The Mustang's stillness wasn't submission, it was consideration, a conscious choice to support his human companion. "What happened?" Elena asked, setting down a basket covered with a checkered cloth. Miguel carefully straightened, his hand never leaving Thunder's neck. "The storm," he answered simply. It reminded him of the fire. Elena nodded, understanding without further explanation. "And now? Now we are..." Miguel paused, searching for the right word. "Connected." The morning sun filtered through the stable windows, casting golden bars across the straw-covered floor. Miguel slid carefully from Thunder's back, his movements fluid and unhurried. The Mustang turned to face him, dark eyes reflecting something that transcended animal instinct. Recognition, perhaps, or the acknowledgement of a covenant formed in shared vulnerability. "You should eat," Elena said, uncovering the basket to reveal warm tortillas and a thermos of coffee. "Your day will be long." As Miguel accepted the offering with grateful hands, Elena studied Thunder with newfound respect. My father always said you can tell a horse's soul by how they stand after a storm. And what does Thunder's soul tell you? Miguel asked, sipping the strong coffee. Elena's weathered face softened. That he has chosen his person. After Elena left, Miguel began what would become their new routine. He led Thunder from the isolation stable to the small paddock behind it, using no lead rope, no halter, just the quiet expectation that the Mustang would follow. Thunder did, matching his pace precisely to Miguel's, stopping when he stopped, turning when he turned. Instead of traditional training commands, Miguel developed a language of subtle cues. A specific melody played on the guitar meant, "Walk beside me." A Spanish phrase whispered at a certain pitch indicated, "Stop and wait." A gentle touch at the withers asked for turning. Thunder absorbed these communications with remarkable intelligence, as if grateful for a dialogue that honored his comprehension. Marisol arrived mid-morning, her university textbooks tucked under one arm, a digital camera in her free hand. She watched silently as Miguel moved with Thunder around the paddock, the pair executing complex patterns that seemed choreographed by invisible threads of understanding. "This is revolutionary," she said finally, adjusting her glasses. "The established training methods all rely on dominance theory, but what you're doing..." She gestured to where Thunder was mirroring Miguel's movements without restraint. "This is partnership. It's how my father worked with horses," Miguel replied, running his hand along Thunder's sleek neck. He said force teaches fear, but patience teaches trust. Marisol began recording their session systematically, taking notes in a leather-bound journal. "I'm documenting everything for my behavioral study course," she explained. "Professor Alvarez won't believe this without evidence." As word spread through the ranch, other workers found reasons to pass by the paddock. Ernesto brought carrots, left over from the main stable. Diego, who tended the ranch's vegetable garden, arrived with fresh apples that might otherwise go to waste. Even some of the younger Anglo cowboys began to linger, watching with barely concealed fascination as the Mustang that had sent 3 trainers to the hospital now moved in perfect harmony with the quiet Mexican stable hand. On the 4th day after the storm, Joe Running Bear appeared at the paddock fence, his presence as steady and unobtrusive as an ancient oak. He watched silently as Miguel worked with Thunder, the Mustang now accepting a light halter adorned with colorful woven threads that Marisol had brought. "You have awakened old memories in him," Joe said when Miguel approached the fence for a water break. "What memories?" Miguel asked, wiping sweat from his brow. Joe's deeply lined face remained impassive, but his eyes held ancient knowledge. "Before the white man came with bits and spurs, my people rode with just a braided cord around the neck. We spoke to horses with our thoughts and feelings, not with metal and leather." He nodded toward Thunder. This one remembers that old way in his blood. Miguel considered this, watching Thunder graze peacefully nearby. "How did your people first gain a horse's trust?" "With respect," Joe answered simply. "And with song. Every horse had its own song that called to its spirit." The old man hummed a few notes, a melody that seemed to rise from the earth itself. In the old ceremonial dances, a good horse would move with its rider as one being, feeling the drum in both their hearts. That evening, Miguel incorporated Joe's wisdom into their practice. Instead of guitar music, he began to hum deep, rhythmic tones that resonated in his chest. Thunder's response was immediate, ears forward, body alert but relaxed, eyes focused entirely on Miguel. As the sun set behind the distant hills, casting long shadows across the paddock, Miguel and Thunder moved together in what could only be described as a dance. The Mustang matched Miguel's steps, turning when he turned, stopping when he stopped, all without physical guidance, as if they shared a single nervous system. "It's like watching history," Marisol whispered to her mother, who had come to observe. "Something from before bridles and saddles, before domination became the way." Their harmony was interrupted by the sharp slam of a truck door. Brady Wilson strode toward the paddock, his face set in lines of irritation and skepticism. He carried a training whip casually in one hand, the leather tail dragging in the dust. "Whitaker wants a progress report," he announced, eyes narrowing as he observed Thunder standing calmly beside Miguel. "Impressive parlor trick, Ramirez. But can the beast actually be ridden? That's what matters for the rodeo." The mention of the rapidly approaching deadline sent a current of tension through Miguel's body, a tension that Thunder immediately sensed. The Mustang shifted position, placing himself slightly between Miguel and Brady, nostrils flared as he assessed the potential threat. "We're working at his pace, Mr. Wilson," Miguel answered, keeping his voice neutral despite the implied criticism. "Building trust takes time." Brady snorted. "Time's running out. Let me show you how it's really done." Without waiting for permission, he climbed through the fence rails, uncoiling the whip with practiced efficiency. Thunder's reaction was instantaneous. His entire demeanor transformed. Head high, eyes wide, muscles tensed for flight or fight. The weeks of careful trust building seemed to evaporate in seconds, replaced by the primitive fear response of a wild animal confronted with familiar danger. "Mr. Wilson, please," Miguel began, but Brady ignored him, advancing with the confidence of a man accustomed to having his authority unquestioned. "Stand aside, Ramirez. The horse needs to understand who's in charge." What happened next occurred with such speed that later accounts would differ. Brady flicked the whip toward Thunder's hindquarters, not striking, but threatening. The Mustang, triggered by the motion, exploded into defensive action, charging toward the fence with such force that posts shuddered in the earth. Miguel moved without conscious thought, placing himself in Thunder's path, speaking rapid Spanish in a low, steady voice. The Mustang veered at the last possible moment, hooves tearing divots from the packed earth as he circled the paddock in blind panic. "Get out!" Miguel shouted at Brady, authority replacing his usual deference. "You're undoing everything!" Brady backed toward the fence, face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "This proves my point. The animal's dangerous and unpredictable. It'll never be ready for the rodeo." After Brady's departure, it took nearly 2 hours of patient work before Thunder would approach Miguel again. The Mustang circled warily, stopping occasionally to snort and paw the ground, his eyes still showing too much white, the sign of a horse in distress. "Lo siento, amigo," Miguel murmured repeatedly, sitting cross-legged in the center of the paddock, guitar across his lap. "I'm sorry he frightened you." Gradually, the familiar music and Miguel's steady presence began to counteract the trauma of Brady's intervention. Thunder's circling grew tighter, his stops more frequent, until finally he approached Miguel and lowered his head, blowing warm breath against Miguel's shoulder. "I won't let them hurt you," Miguel promised, reaching up to stroke the muscular neck. "Somehow we'll find a way." That evening, as Miguel led Thunder back to the isolation stable, Joe Running Bear intercepted them, carrying a small beaded object. "For the horse," he said, holding out what appeared to be a decorative brow band made of supple leather adorned with colorful beads and small silver conchos. Comanche horsemen used these for their special mounts. The patterns speak of protection. Miguel accepted the gift with both hands, recognizing its significance. "Thank you. I'm honored." Joe nodded once. "The old ways remember, even when people forget." He touched the beadwork lightly. "These patterns tell the horse that he carries thunder in his hooves and lightning in his heart, but that his spirit remains free even as he chooses to walk with a human companion." Later, as twilight deepened into night, Miguel fastened the beaded browband to Thunder's halter. The Mustang stood perfectly still during the adjustment, as if understanding the ceremonial nature of the moment. "You look like a war chief's mount now," Miguel said with a smile, stepping back to admire the effect. The colorful beadwork stood out against Thunder's black coat like stars against the night sky. A soft cough from the stable doorway announced Whitaker's presence. The ranch owner stood watching them, his expression unreadable in the dimming light. "Rodeo's in 3 days, Ramirez," he said without preamble. "I need to know if this experiment of yours is going to make me money or make me a laughingstock." Miguel straightened, meeting his employer's gaze directly, a liberty he would never have taken before Thunder. "He's learning quickly, sir, but he needs to trust the rider completely. And does he trust you completely? Whitaker asked, a calculating edge to his voice. Instead of answering verbally, Miguel turned to Thunder and whispered a phrase in Spanish. The Mustang immediately lowered himself slightly, an invitation to mount. With fluid grace, Miguel slid onto Thunder's bare back, his hands resting lightly on the powerful neck. Thunder stood perfectly steady, accepting the weight as if it belonged there. Whitaker's eyebrows rose marginally, the closest he came to expressing surprise. Impressive party trick, but the rodeo requires more than standing still. It needs control, precision, showmanship. We're working on that, Miguel replied, sliding from Thunder's back. Every day brings progress. It better, Whitaker said flatly, because Henderson called again today. Offered double what I paid for this horse. A cold smile crossed his face. Seems your little musical method has caught some attention. After Whitaker left, Miguel leaned his forehead against Thunder's neck, absorbing the warmth and steady pulse of the great animal. Did you hear that? He murmured. Tate Henderson, the man who breaks horses by breaking their spirit first. Thunder shifted slightly, pressing back against Miguel as if in reassurance. In that moment, Miguel made a decision that went against 20 years of careful survival in a country that viewed him as disposable. He would not allow Thunder to be sold to Henderson, even if it meant risking everything he had built. During a particularly impressive demonstration the following day, where Thunder executed complex movements following only the sound of Miguel's guitar, Whitaker's phone rang loudly from the fence line where he observed. The ranch owner stepped away to answer, but his voice carried clearly in the still afternoon air. Henderson? Yes, I'm watching him right now. The price? Well, that depends on what you're offering. Whitaker laughed, a sharp sound without warmth. Name your price, Clint. That horse and that method are worth a fortune on the circuit. Miguel's blood ran cold as Whitaker's conversation carried across the paddock. The calculating tone, the casual discussion of Thunder's worth as if the Mustang were merely an investment to be traded. It confirmed what Miguel had long suspected about his employer. To men like Whitaker and Henderson, everything and everyone had a price tag, their value measured only in dollars and prestige. That evening, as Miguel led Thunder back to his stall, the Mustang seemed to sense his companion's unease. The horse nudged Miguel's shoulder gently, dark eyes questioning in the fading light. Miguel ran his hand along Thunder's powerful neck, feeling the steady pulse beneath the sleek coat. They want to separate us, amigo, he murmured in Spanish. To them, you are just property to be bought and sold. Thunder's ears flicked forward, attentive to the cadence of Miguel's voice, even if the words themselves held no meaning for him. The Mustang had learned to read Miguel's emotions with uncanny accuracy, responding not just to commands but to subtle shifts in mood and intention. By the following morning, news of Thunder's remarkable progress had spread beyond Whitaker Ranch. As Miguel worked with the Mustang in the paddock, executing intricate patterns guided only by soft words and musical cues, a small pickup truck with a faded logo from a local Spanish-language radio station pulled up the ranch drive. Elena appeared at the paddock fence, her expression a mixture of excitement and concern. "The community is talking about you," she said, nodding toward the truck where a young woman with a recorder was speaking with one of the ranch hands. Maria Gutierrez from Radio Cultura. Someone called her station about El hombre que habla con caballos, the man who speaks with horses. Miguel felt a flutter of anxiety. Attention was the last thing he wanted, especially now when Thunder's future hung in precarious balance. Yet he couldn't help noticing how Thunder responded to the arrival of visitors, his posture alert but not fearful, curious rather than defensive, progress that would have seemed impossible just weeks ago. By Sunday afternoon, the ripple effect had become a wave. Families from the nearby Latino community began appearing at the ranch entrance, parents with children in their Sunday best, asking permission to see El Milagro del Caballo Salvaje, the miracle of the wild horse. Whitaker, never one to miss a marketing opportunity, instructed the security guard to allow small groups to observe from a designated area near the paddock. "Think of it as free publicity," he told Miguel with a businessman's smile that never reached his eyes. These people drive past my ranch every day. Now they'll associate Whitaker Ranch with exceptional horsemanship. Miguel recognized the exploitation in Whitaker's words but said nothing. If public interest offered even temporary protection for Thunder, he would accept it. The children were the most affected by Thunder's story. They pressed against the fence, wide-eyed and reverent, as Miguel demonstrated how the Mustang responded to different musical phrases. When Thunder approached the fence, lowering his massive head to inspect the visitors, several children gasped in delighted fear. "He remembers being free," Miguel explained to them in Spanish, a language he rarely had the opportunity to speak on the ranch except with fellow workers. "And now he's learning to trust again." "Can I touch him?" asked a small boy in a carefully ironed shirt, his face solemn with the importance of the moment. Miguel considered the request, assessing Thunder's mood. The Mustang stood calmly, ears forward in curious attention rather than pinned back in suspicion. "Hold out your hand, palm flat," Miguel instructed. "Let him come to you." The collective intake of breath from parents and children alike was audible as Thunder stretched his neck over the fence, nostrils flaring as he investigated the small human hand. After a moment's consideration, the Mustang gently touched his muzzle to the boy's palm. "He likes you," Miguel said softly as the child's face transformed with wonder. Word of these Sunday demonstrations spread rapidly through the community. Marisol's social media posts showing Thunder's progress attracted growing attention, especially among younger Latinos who saw in Miguel's story echoes of their own family's struggles for recognition and respect. Whitaker, meanwhile, was already planning how to monetize what he began calling traditional Mexican training methods. Miguel overheard him on the phone with his marketing consultant, discussing promotional materials that would feature authentic Doma Mexicana techniques exclusive to Whitaker Ranch. "We'll need some photos of you in traditional Mexican attire," Whitaker informed Miguel one morning, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. "Something with embroidery, maybe a sombrero. The clients eat up that authentic cultural stuff." Miguel gritted his teeth but nodded. 20 years of survival in Texas had taught him when to fight and when to strategically acquiesce. For now, protecting Thunder took priority over pride. As Thunder's confidence grew, Miguel gradually introduced him to other humans. Marisol was the first besides Miguel that Thunder allowed to touch him without hesitation. Joe Running Bear came next, the old Comanche's quiet presence seeming to resonate with the Mustang on a level that transcended training. "He remembers the old ways in his blood," Joe observed as Thunder allowed him to run wrinkled hands along his scarred flank. Before the white man came, horses and the people lived in balance, not master and slave, but partners in survival. Miguel nodded, understanding the deeper meaning in Joe's words, the subtle critique of systems that valued domination over cooperation. It was a perspective rarely voiced at Whitaker Ranch, where hierarchy was as fixed as the fences that defined property lines. On a particularly warm afternoon, Miguel was demonstrating Thunder's progress to a small group of visitors when a gleaming black SUV pulled up the ranch drive. Tate Henderson stepped out, his custom boots and trophy belt buckle announcing his status as clearly as Whitaker's did. The rival rancher approached the paddock with the confident stride of a man accustomed to taking what he wanted. "So this is the famous Thunder," Henderson called out, leaning against the fence rail. His assessing gaze moved from the horse to Miguel, dismissive in its brief acknowledgement. "Quite a show you've got going, Whitaker." Clint Whitaker emerged from his office, hand extended in false camaraderie. "Tate, didn't expect you today. Thought I'd see this miracle horse for myself." Henderson's smile didn't reach his eyes. "After all, I'm prepared to offer a premium price." Thunder, who had been performing intricate movements in response to Miguel's guitar, stopped abruptly. The Mustang's entire demeanor changed, head raised, nostrils flared, body tensed as if preparing to flee or fight. Though Henderson had never laid a hand on him, Thunder seemed to sense the man's predatory intent, the evaluation of his worth as commodity rather than being. Miguel moved instinctively to Thunder's side, one hand resting lightly on the Mustang's neck, feeling the accelerated pulse beneath his palm. "He's sensitive to energy," Miguel explained quietly. "He knows who sees him as property and who sees him as partner." Henderson's expression hardened momentarily before he forced a laugh. Property is exactly what he is, legally speaking. A $50,000 investment that Whitaker here is sentimentalizing. He turned to Whitaker, lowering his voice, though not enough to prevent Miguel from hearing. Any price, Clint. Name it. That horse and your Mexican's technique could revolutionize my breeding program. Miguel felt thunder trembling beneath his touch, the Mustang's fear response triggered not by physical threat but by the cold calculation in Henderson's voice. For an animal that had known freedom, perhaps there was no greater threat than being reduced to an asset, a means to profit and prestige. Later that afternoon, Father Gonzalez from St. Mary's, the church where many ranch workers attended Sunday Mass, arrived at the paddock. The priest watched silently as Miguel worked with Thunder, the Mustang now accepting a light saddle pad, though still no saddle or bridle. "Your father would be proud," Father Gonzalez said when Miguel approached the fence for a water break. "Guillermo had a similar gift, from what the older parishioners tell me." Miguel felt a tightness in his throat at the mention of his father. "He taught me that patience builds trust, but trust must be earned new each day." The priest nodded, his weathered face solemn. "The children speak of nothing else at catechism. El hombre que escucha a los caballos, the man who listens to horses." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The community sees in your story something of their own, the struggle to maintain dignity when others see only utility." Before Miguel could respond, Thunder approached the fence, extending his nose toward Father Gonzalez in cautious greeting. The priest remained perfectly still, allowing the Mustang to investigate at his own pace. "Remarkable," Father Gonzalez murmured as Thunder finally touched his muzzle to the priest's outstretched hand. "He chooses whom to trust." "Yes," Miguel agreed, watching the interaction with quiet pride. "And he never forgets those who've earned that trust, or those who've betrayed it." The following morning, Miguel arrived at the isolation stable to find Whitaker engaged in intense conversation with Henderson just outside. Thunder, sensing Miguel's approach, nickered softly in greeting, causing both men to turn. "Ah, Ramirez," Whitaker said, his smile tight and businesslike. "Mr. Henderson here has made an extremely generous offer for Thunder, and he's interested in hiring you as a training consultant as well. Quite the opportunity." Miguel studied both men, noting the calculation in their eyes, the assumption that everything and everyone had a price. Thunder moved restlessly in his stall, picking up on the tension radiating from his human companion. "Thunder isn't fully trained yet," Miguel replied carefully. "The rodeo is still days away." "About that," Henderson interjected smoothly. "I'm thinking bigger than some local rodeo. With your methods and my connections, we could take this show national. Imagine the publicity. The wild Mustang tamed by ancient Mexican secrets." He laughed, the sound hollow and commercial. "Americans love that mystical foreigner angle." Miguel felt a cold certainty settle in his chest. In Henderson's hands, Thunder would become a circus act, his spirit broken by whatever means necessary to ensure reliable performance. The connection Miguel had built based on mutual respect and choice would be perverted into spectacle and exploitation. "Thunder needs more time," Miguel insisted, moving toward the Mustang's stall. The horse immediately extended his neck over the half door, seeking contact with Miguel's hand. "Time is money," Henderson replied dismissively. "And speaking of money," he pulled a folded document from his jacket pocket. "I've already drawn up the purchase agreement. Just need Clint's signature, and that magnificent animal is mine." That evening, as Miguel led Thunder through their now familiar exercises, his mind raced with impossible calculations. His tenuous immigration status, the money his family in Oaxaca depended on, the promises Whitaker had made about Thunder's future, all of it hung in a precarious balance that could collapse at any moment. When Whitaker approached the paddock at sunset, his expression was set in lines of decision. "Ramirez, I've been thinking about Henderson's offer. 50% above market for a horse that nearly killed 3 trainers a month ago? It's good business." "You promised Thunder would be safe if he performs well at the rodeo," Miguel reminded him, struggling to keep accusation from his voice. And you forget your position, Whitaker responded, his smile cold. In this country, everything has a price, especially for someone with your immigration situation. The threat in Whitaker's words hung in the twilight air, hovering between them like a vulture. In this country, everything has a price, especially for someone with your immigration situation. Miguel felt the familiar coldness of vulnerability spread through his chest, a sensation he'd lived with for 20 years, yet one that never lost its sting. Thunder sensed the tension immediately, moving closer to Miguel's side, ears pricked forward, dark eyes fixed on Whitaker with newfound wariness. The Mustang's loyalty had become increasingly evident to everyone at the ranch. Where once he had feared all humans equally, he now made clear distinctions between those he trusted and those he did not. Whitaker seemed to reconsider his approach, perhaps recognizing that crude threats might not yield the desired results. His tone shifted, becoming almost paternal, a change Miguel found more unsettling than the overt intimidation. "Look, Ramirez," Whitaker said, leaning against the paddock fence. "I'm not unreasonable. You've done something remarkable with this horse, something that could be valuable to both of us." He gestured expansively toward the ranch buildings. "What if I offered you a real contract? Not just stable handwork, but an official position developing this Mexican horse whispering method of yours?" Miguel kept one hand on Thunder's neck, drawing strength from the steady warmth. "What kind of contract, sir?" The next morning, Miguel found himself seated in Whitaker's office, a space he had cleaned hundreds of times but rarely been invited to occupy. The leather chair creaked beneath him, too soft after years of hard physical labor. On the desk between them lay a multi-page document, dense with legal terminology that Miguel struggled to decipher. "It's straightforward," Whitaker explained, tapping the paper with a manicured fingernail. "You'll develop and implement the training program, exclusively for Whitaker Ranch. We'll market it as authentic Mexican horsemanship. People eat that cultural stuff up. Your name and image rights belong to the ranch, of course, and any techniques you develop remain proprietary." Miguel's eyes caught on particular phrases: 6-day work week, performance quotas, exclusive rights to all methods and practices. One section specifically mentioned Thunder, designating him as demonstration animal, with all performances, appearances, and breeding rights controlled by Whitaker Ranch. "And my immigration status?" Miguel asked quietly. Whitaker smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. "We'll sponsor a work visa naturally, tied to your employment here, of course." The arrangement was clear: security in exchange for complete control. Miguel would become as much Whitaker's property as Thunder would be. Both valuable assets to be exploited for maximum profit, their freedom existing only at their owner's discretion. "I need time to consider, sir," Miguel said carefully. "Of course," Whitaker replied, leaning back in his chair. "Take until tomorrow. The rodeo's in 4 days, and Henderson's offer won't wait forever." That afternoon, as Miguel worked with Thunder in the paddock, Marisol arrived with excitement vibrating in her movements. "You won't believe what's happening," she said, showing Miguel her phone screen. "My post about you and Thunder has over 5,000 shares. People from all over Texas are asking about the Mexican horse whisperer." Miguel glanced at the screen, seeing video clips of himself and Thunder moving in synchronized harmony. The comments below overflowed with admiration, many in Spanish from people who saw in his gentle methods a validation of traditional knowledge often dismissed by the mainstream equestrian world. "This could be important," Marisol continued, her young face earnest. "People need to see alternatives to breaking a horse's spirit. Your way shows respect, not dominance." Thunder approached, nudging Marisol's shoulder in greeting, a familiarity he now extended to the small circle of humans he had accepted into his trust. The Mustang's psychological transformation continued to amaze Miguel. Where once Thunder had seen all humans as threats, he now demonstrated remarkable discernment, approaching those with gentle energy while maintaining vigilant distance from those who projected dominance or aggression. "My father would say Thunder is teaching us, not the other way around," Miguel replied, watching the Mustang's relaxed posture with Marisol, a stark contrast to his rigid alertness whenever Whitaker or Brady approached. When Miguel returned to his trailer that evening, Elena was waiting with a thermos of her special atole, the sweet corn drink she made only for special occasions. Her expression was grave as she poured the steaming liquid into Miguel's single cup. "Whitaker is calling people," she said without preamble, "asking about showcasing your method at exhibitions across Texas, making big plans for you and Thunder." Miguel sipped the sweet drink, letting its warmth spread through him. "He offered me a contract today. Makes me his property as surely as Thunder." Elena nodded, unsurprised. "And if you refuse?" "Thunder goes to Henderson, and I—" Miguel didn't need to finish the sentence. They both knew what happened to undocumented workers who became inconvenient. That night, sleep eluded Miguel. Through his small window, he could see the isolation stable where Thunder now resided in relative comfort, the Mustang's status elevated from problem animal to valuable asset in Whitaker's ledger of worth. The transformation in their circumstances shared an ironic parallel. Both Miguel and Thunder had become too valuable to discard, yet that very value threatened to chain them more completely than ever before. When dawn finally broke, Miguel made his way to the stable, finding Thunder alert and waiting. The Mustang greeted him with a soft nicker that seemed to hold a question. "I don't know what to do, amigo," Miguel admitted, resting his forehead against Thunder's powerful neck. "If I sign Whitaker's contract, we stay together, but lose our freedom. If I refuse—" He couldn't bring himself to voice the alternative. Thunder shifted slightly, pressing back against Miguel in what felt remarkably like reassurance. In that moment of connection, Miguel realized that Thunder had already taught him the most important lesson. Dignity couldn't be bargained away, no matter the cost. Later that morning, Miguel found Whitaker in the main stable, inspecting a new thoroughbred acquisition. "I've considered your offer, sir," Miguel said, forcing himself to meet Whitaker's eyes directly, a small act of defiance that didn't go unnoticed. "And?" Whitaker prompted, impatience barely concealed. "I have a counterproposal," Miguel continued, drawing on courage he hadn't known he possessed. "I'll prepare Thunder for the rodeo as agreed. If he performs well, I ask only one thing in return." Whitaker's eyebrows rose marginally. "Which is?" "That he not be sold to Henderson or sent to slaughter, regardless of what happens after." A smile spread slowly across Whitaker's face, the smile of a man who believes he's won a negotiation. "You surprise me, Ramirez. No demands for yourself? Just the horse?" Miguel remained silent, letting his request stand unembellished. "Fine," Whitaker said finally. "If that beast performs well enough to justify his price tag, I won't sell him to Henderson or send him to slaughter." His smile sharpened. "But if you make me look like a fool at the rodeo, you're finished here. And the horse? Well, business is business." As the day of the rodeo approached, Miguel's training sessions with Thunder intensified. They worked now on specific routines that would showcase the Mustang's intelligence and the unique bond they shared. Joe Running Bear provided insights from ancient Comanche horse ceremonies, suggesting movements that honored Thunder's wild spirit rather than suppressing it. "Show them the dance of partnership," Joe advised, demonstrating with his gnarled hands how horse and rider once moved together in ceremonial circles. "Not the dance of submission." Marisol continued documenting everything, her academic interest now fully aligned with her emotional investment in their success. "I'm creating a website," she announced. "People should know there are alternatives to breaking a horse's spirit." Word of Thunder's transformation had spread throughout the Latino community. On the final Sunday before the rodeo, families arrived at the ranch in unprecedented numbers, many bringing small gifts: hand-woven bracelets for Miguel, carrots and apples for Thunder, small religious medallions for protection. Father Gonzalez performed an impromptu blessing, sprinkling holy water in a circle around Miguel and Thunder while murmuring prayers in Latin and Spanish. The gathered community responded with fervent amens, creating a moment of spiritual solidarity that transcended the commercial transaction Whitaker envisioned. That evening, as twilight painted the Texas sky in deepening shades of purple and gold, Miguel and Thunder practiced their rodeo routine one final time. The Mustang executed perfect circles, precise stops, and fluid direction changes, all without bridle or bit, responding only to Miguel's subtle body language and occasional soft Spanish phrases. From the fence line, Elena watched with Marisol and Joe, their presence a silent affirmation of faith in the impossible partnership they had witnessed evolving over the past weeks. "It's beautiful," Marisol whispered, her camera forgotten in her hands as she simply absorbed the moment. "Like they're having a conversation only they can hear." Joe nodded, his weathered face solemn. "The old ones would say their spirits are braided together now. One cannot move without the other feeling it." The defining moment came when Miguel, sitting bareback on Thunder, began to sing softly, a traditional Mexican corrido his father had taught him, about a black horse that carried its rider through darkness toward freedom. Thunder's ears swiveled back to catch every note, his powerful body responding with subtle shifts that matched the song's rhythm perfectly. As the final notes faded into the gathering darkness, Thunder did something he had never done before. Without prompting, the Mustang executed a perfect levade, rising slightly on his hind legs, forelegs folded, head proud, the classical movement of equine nobility that no one had taught him. Gasps came from the small audience at the fence. Even Miguel was momentarily surprised before adjusting his balance instinctively to move with Thunder's elevated position. For 3 perfect heartbeats, they held the pose, man and horse creating a silhouette against the sunset that spoke of dignity, trust, and mutual respect. When Thunder returned to all fours, the small group at the fence broke into spontaneous applause. Miguel slid from the Mustang's back, running a hand along the powerful neck in gratitude and admiration. "That's it," he said to Elena and the others as he led Thunder to the fence. "That's how we'll end our performance." "It will bring the house down," Marisol predicted, her eyes bright with excitement. "People have never seen anything like this." That night, as Miguel prepared to leave the stable, he found Thunder watching him with unusual intensity, as if the Mustang sensed the magnitude of what lay ahead. Miguel approached, stroking the scarred muzzle gently. "Tomorrow we rest," he told Thunder quietly. "And the next day, we show them what true partnership looks like." As Miguel turned to leave, he heard the soft sound of hoofbeats behind him. Thunder had freed himself from the loosely fastened stall door, something the intelligent Mustang had likely been capable of doing for weeks, but had chosen not to. The horse approached Miguel and lowered his head, pressing his forehead against Miguel's chest in a gesture so deliberate it could not be misinterpreted. In that moment, Miguel understood what his father had meant about horses having memory in their souls. This wasn't just training or conditioning, it was a covenant between two beings who had recognized in each other something essential: the unquenchable desire for dignity and freedom, and the willingness to stand together against those who would deny it. On the night before the competition, Elena found Miguel sitting outside his trailer, staring at the stars. "Are you ready?" she asked, settling beside him on the worn wooden step. "No," Miguel admitted with a small smile. "But Thunder is." Elena patted his hand, her palm calloused from decades of labor. "Remember, whatever happens tomorrow, you've already won something more valuable than any trophy." As darkness deepened around them, distant headlights appeared on the ranch road. An unexpected visitor at this late hour. The sleek black SUV that pulled up carried Tate Henderson and a man in an expensive suit whom Miguel didn't recognize. Henderson approached with the confident stride of a man accustomed to getting his way. "Evening, Ramirez," he called, not waiting for a response. "Just finalized some details with Whitaker. Regardless of what happens at the rodeo, this magnificent animal will be coming to Henderson Farms immediately after." He smiled coldly. "Don't worry, we'll take good care of your training investment." Henderson's words struck Miguel like a physical blow. The casual certainty, the assumption that deals made between powerful men were immutable. It was a reality Miguel had navigated his entire life in America. Thunder seemed to sense the threat in Henderson's voice, his ears flicking back and forth as he watched from his stall. "The contract isn't signed yet," Miguel said, finding courage in Thunder's attentive gaze. Henderson laughed, the sound sharp in the night air. Contracts are formalities, Ramirez. Whitaker and I have an understanding. Men of business always do. With that, he returned to his vehicle, leaving Miguel with the cold certainty that the rodeo performance might already be meaningless. The decision about Thunder's fate potentially already made. The journey to San Antonio began before dawn, the highway stretching ahead like a promise neither Miguel nor Thunder fully trusted. Ernesto had volunteered his pickup truck to pull the small trailer that Elena had convinced Whitaker to lend them, a far cry from the luxurious horse transports that would carry the expensive show horses to the rodeo. "You'll ride in back with him," Whitaker had instructed when approving the arrangement. "Keep him calm. I don't want him arriving agitated and making me look foolish." And so Miguel sat on a small bench in the trailer's corner, feeling every bump and sway of the road, watching Thunder maintain his balance with the innate adaptability that had helped him survive in the wild. The Mustang's eyes occasionally met Miguel's, a silent communication passing between them that required no translation. 2 hours into their journey, Ernesto pulled into a rest stop. "Need to check the trailer hitch," he explained, but when he returned, his expression was troubled. "Miguel," he said quietly, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard, "I found this in the glove compartment when I was looking for a map." He handed over a folded sheet of paper, official rodeo regulations, with one section highlighted in bright yellow. All handlers/trainers must be certified by the American Quarter Horse Association or equivalent professional body. Miguel's stomach clenched as he read the requirement. Whitaker knew this, he said, the realization dawning with cold certainty. He knew I couldn't officially compete. "There's more," Ernesto added grimly. "I overheard Brady talking yesterday. Henderson has already paid a deposit on Thunder. The rodeo is just theater." The remainder of the journey passed in weighted silence, Miguel's mind racing through impossible calculations. Thunder sensed the change, standing more alertly, his eyes rarely leaving Miguel's face. The Mustang had learned to read subtle shifts in his human companion's emotions with remarkable accuracy. A survival skill that served wild horses well, now redirected toward the complex dynamics of human deception. They arrived at the AT&T Center to find it already bustling with activity. Gleaming horse trailers bearing prestigious ranch logos lined the parking area, their owners unloading magnificent animals with practiced efficiency. By contrast, Ernesto's weathered pickup and small trailer drew immediate notice, and not the favorable kind. "Looks like someone took a wrong turn to the fair," a voice drawled as Miguel led Thunder carefully down the ramp. The speaker, a young cowboy in pristine boots and a championship belt buckle, leaned against a trailer emblazoned with the Henderson Farms logo. Thunder's reaction was immediate. Ears back, nostrils flared, body tensing with recognition of threat. The Mustang remembered voices that held contempt, bodies that carried aggression. Miguel placed a steadying hand on Thunder's neck, feeling the rapid pulse beneath the sleek coat. "Steady, amigo," he murmured. "They only have power if we give it to them." Whitaker appeared moments later, dressed in a tailored Western suit complete with bolo tie and hand-tooled boots. His expression tightened when he spotted Miguel and Thunder. "Get him settled in the assigned stall," he instructed curtly. "Then meet me in the registration office. There's been a complication." The complication became clear when Miguel arrived at the wood-paneled office 15 minutes later. Whitaker stood with the rodeo director and 2 other men in pressed shirts and expensive hats, members of the organizing committee, judging by their official badges. "Ramirez," Whitaker greeted him with forced joviality. "These gentlemen were just explaining a small technical issue with your participation." The rodeo director, a silver-haired man with a perpetual squint, cleared his throat importantly. "As I was telling Mr. Whitaker, our regulations are quite clear. All participants must be certified trainers with recognized credentials." "Which, unfortunately, you lack," Whitaker added, his regretful tone so perfectly calibrated that only Miguel could detect the satisfaction beneath it. "A most unfortunate oversight on my part," Whitaker continued for the benefit of the committee members. "In my enthusiasm for Ramirez's remarkable progress with the animal, I failed to verify his professional qualifications. The director nodded sympathetically. Rules are rules. Can't make exceptions, or everyone would want one. Miguel stood silently, understanding with perfect clarity that this had been Whitaker's plan all along. A public demonstration of generosity in allowing his Mexican stable hand to showcase his natural talents, followed by the inevitable disqualification that would pave the way for Thunder's sale to Henderson. The rodeo had never been a real opportunity. It was theatrical justification for a decision already made. One of the committee members, a heavy-set man with a more thoughtful expression, studied Miguel with unexpected intensity. "This is the Mustang trainer everyone's talking about? The one using traditional Mexican methods?" When Whitaker nodded, the man continued, "Shame to disappoint all those folks who've heard about this. Bad for community relations." He turned to the director. "What about a special exhibition? Outside the competition but still part of the show?" A glint appeared in the director's eye, the recognition of publicity potential. An ethnic cultural demonstration between the barrel racing and team roping? Could work. Audience loves novelty acts. Miguel felt his face flush at the dismissive categorization but kept his expression neutral. Being relegated to novelty act was humiliating, but it might be Thunder's only chance. "I think that would be an acceptable compromise," Whitaker said magnanimously. "Ramirez can demonstrate his folk methods, even if he can't compete officially." As Miguel left the office, he found Elena, Marisol, and a small group of ranch workers waiting anxiously. Their faces fell as he explained the situation. "They planned this all along," Marisol said, anger flashing in her eyes. "Set you up to fail on a technicality." "Not fail," Miguel corrected quietly. "We'll still perform, just not compete." "As entertainment between real events," Elena added bitterly. "Like a circus act." Miguel nodded, the truth of her assessment impossible to deny. "But people will still see Thunder, see what's possible without breaking a spirit." When they returned to the temporary stabling area, Miguel found Thunder agitated, pacing the unfamiliar stall. The Mustang calmed immediately at Miguel's approach, lowering his head to press against Miguel's chest in greeting. "We're still going to perform, amigo," Miguel told him, stroking the powerful neck. "Just not for prizes or recognition, for something more important." Throughout the afternoon, Miguel noticed increased activity around Thunder's stall, ranch hands from neighboring counties finding excuses to walk past, cowboys pausing to study the Mustang with professional curiosity, children pointing and whispering about the wild horse. Word had spread, creating an anticipation neither Whitaker nor the rodeo committee had anticipated. Most surprising was the steady stream of Latino families who began arriving at the arena hours before the evening program. Many wore their Sunday best, treating the occasion with reverence usually reserved for religious observations. They approached Miguel shyly, offering encouragement in Spanish and small tokens of support, holy cards, braided crosses, even traditional Mexican treats wrapped in colorful paper. "They've been talking about you at church," explained an elderly woman who introduced herself as Señora Vasquez. "Father Gonzalez told us how you speak to this horse in the old way, with respect instead of force." As evening approached and the main arena filled with spectators, Miguel prepared Thunder for their performance. He brushed the Mustang's coat until it gleamed like polished obsidian, securing Joe Running Bear's beaded brow band as the final touch. The contrast between Thunder's natural elegance and the gaudy show tack of the competition horses emphasized his wild heritage, a reminder that beauty existed before human enhancement. Miguel was adjusting the ceremonial brow band when Brady Wilson appeared, his expression smug. "Whitaker says you go on after the barrel racing. 10 minutes max. Keep it simple. The audience just wants a quick thrill before the real events continue." After Brady left, Marisol approached with unexpected excitement. "Miguel, you need to see this." She led him to a spot where they could view the arena stands. What Miguel saw made his breath catch. An entire section filled with members of the Latino community, many holding small Mexican flags or colorful signs with messages in Spanish. "Fuerza Miguel" and "Viva Thunder." "They're coming from all over San Antonio," Marisol explained. "Someone from Telemundo is here too. This is bigger than Whitaker planned. When Miguel returned to Thunder's stall, he found a young girl waiting timidly outside. No more than 10 years old, she wore a carefully pressed dress with ribbons in her hair and clutched a small cage containing a white dove. "Señor Miguel," she said solemnly in Spanish, "my name is Sofia. I brought my dove Esperanza to give you luck." She lifted the cage slightly. "At my school, everyone is talking about the man who speaks with horses." Miguel knelt to meet her eye level, touched by the gesture. "Gracias, pequeña. This means very much to me." As Sofia and her mother walked away, Miguel glanced at Thunder, who had watched the interaction with alert interest. "They believe in us, amigo," he said softly. "Perhaps that's enough." Minutes later, Miguel heard the announcer's voice booming through the arena. "Ladies and gentlemen, before our next competitive event, we have a special cultural demonstration. From Whitaker Ranch, please welcome Miguel Ramirez and Thunder in a display of traditional Mexican natural horsemanship." There was polite applause mixed with a few derisive chuckles from the VIP section where wealthy ranchers sat. Miguel took a deep breath, looking at Thunder's calm, attentive gaze. "Let's show them what true connection looks like," he whispered, leading the Mustang toward the arena entrance. As they stood in the shadows, waiting for their cue to enter, Miguel saw Whitaker and Henderson seated together in the front row, documents spread between them, finalizing their transaction even before Thunder's performance. The sight should have filled Miguel with despair, but instead, he felt a strange calm settle over him. Some decisions were beyond his control, but what happened in the next 10 minutes, the demonstration of dignity, trust, and partnership, that was entirely in his and Thunder's hands. Sofia's words came back to him as he prepared to enter the arena. "Señor Miguel, my grandmother says that when the powerful make plans, God laughs. And today, I think Thunder will laugh too." Sofia's words echoed in Miguel's mind as he stood at the entrance to the arena. "When the powerful make plans, God laughs. And today, I think Thunder will laugh too." The simple wisdom of the child gave him an unexpected surge of confidence. Whatever Whitaker and Henderson had arranged on paper, whatever dismissive introduction the announcer had given, none of it could diminish what was about to unfold. The arena lights dimmed, leaving only a single spotlight illuminating the entrance. A murmur of anticipation rippled through the crowd. For several long moments, nothing happened, and Miguel could hear scattered coughs and a few derisive chuckles from the VIP section where the wealthy ranchers sat. Then, soft as a whisper, the first notes of Miguel's guitar filtered through the arena's sound system. Marisol had insisted on recording his music, arguing that both his hands should be free during the performance. The melody began slowly, a traditional Mexican song that gradually incorporated subtle elements of Native American rhythms, a musical bridge that Joe Running Bear had helped him create. The spotlight remained on the empty entrance, heightening the audience's anticipation. In the VIP section, Whitaker shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Henderson with poorly concealed concern. When Thunder finally entered the arena, he did so alone. No lead rope, no handler, no visible means of control. The magnificent black Mustang moved with fluid grace into the spotlight, his coat gleaming like liquid obsidian, the beaded brow band catching the light in flashes of color. He paused, head high, taking in the vastness of the space and the thousands of eyes fixed upon him. A collective gasp rose from the audience. This was not the trained show pony they had expected, but something altogether more primal and dignified, a wild spirit choosing to present himself on his own terms. Thunder circled the arena once, his movements unhurried and deliberate. When he completed the circle, Miguel finally entered, carrying only his guitar. He wore no cowboy costume, no theatrical Mexican attire, just his cleanest white shirt, his best jeans, and the colorful woven band his grandmother had given him tied around his wrist. The audience fell completely silent as Miguel moved to the center of the arena and began to play. Thunder, responding to the live music rather than the recording, approached with elegant precision. Man and horse acknowledged each other with a subtle exchange of glances before beginning what could only be described as a dance. Thunder moved around Miguel in perfect circles, his hooves striking the ground in rhythm with the music. With each pass, the circles grew smaller, until horse and man were moving as a single entity, Thunder matching every subtle shift in Miguel's body language without visible cues. In the VIP section, Henderson leaned forward, his expression shifting from condescension to reluctant fascination. Beside him, Whitaker's face remained carefully neutral, though his white-knuckled grip on his seat betrayed his tension. Miguel transitioned smoothly from one melody to another, each musical phrase signaling a different movement from Thunder. The Mustang executed perfect lateral passes, smooth transitions between gaits, and precise stops, movements that professionally trained horses often took years to master. What transfixed the audience, however, was not just the technical precision, but the unmistakable communication between man and horse. There were no harsh commands, no bits or spurs, no evidence of forced compliance, only a conversation conducted through music, subtle gestures, and mutual respect. At one point, Miguel set his guitar aside and stepped back. Thunder continued his choreographed movements alone, responding to the recorded music as if he had internalized the melody in his very bones. The Mustang's eyes never left Miguel, their connection transcending physical cues. In the stands, Elena clutched Marisol's hand, tears streaming silently down her weathered cheeks. Joe Running Bear sat perfectly still, his ancient eyes reflecting recognition of something sacred unfolding before him. The Latino families who had come to support Miguel were watching with an intensity that transformed their section into an island of reverent silence amid the larger audience. When Miguel raised his hand in a gentle gesture, Thunder approached and lowered his head slightly. In a movement so fluid it appeared effortless, Miguel swung onto the Mustang's bare back. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Even in exhibition riding, bareback mounting of an untacked horse was rare and potentially dangerous. Yet Thunder stood perfectly steady, accepting Miguel's weight as naturally as he accepted the air in his lungs. When they began to move together, it was with such harmony that it seemed impossible they had been strangers just weeks ago. Miguel guided Thunder through increasingly complex patterns using only the pressure of his legs and occasional whispered Spanish phrases. The Mustang responded with the precision of an athlete and the grace of a dancer. His earlier trauma transformed into focused energy and trust. In the VIP section, conversation had ceased entirely. Henderson's earlier smirk had vanished, replaced by the calculating gaze of a man reassessing the value of what he witnessed. Beside him, Whitaker sat rigidly, caught between pride in Thunder's performance and discomfort at being upstaged by his Mexican stable hand. The performance built toward its climax as the music shifted to a deeper, more resonant melody. With Miguel balanced perfectly on his back, Thunder began to execute a series of movements that combined classical dressage with the natural power of a wild horse. Each transition was smoother than the last, each turn more precise, until the audience was collectively holding its breath. For the final movement, Miguel stood upright on Thunder's back, balancing perfectly as the Mustang circled the arena at a controlled canter. The image was striking. A man standing tall atop a horse moving with powerful grace, both of them embodying dignity and mutual trust rather than dominance and submission. As Thunder slowed to a walk and returned to the center of the arena, Miguel raised his arms in a gesture that seemed to embrace the entire space. It was at this exact moment that Sophia, standing near the arena fence with her mother, opened the small cage she had been holding. Esperanza, the white dove, flew into the arena, circling once above the crowd before descending in graceful spirals. Without hesitation, the bird landed on Miguel's outstretched arm, its white feathers luminous against the backdrop of Thunder's midnight coat. The tableau they created, man standing on the back of the once wild Mustang, white dove perched peacefully on his arm, transcended cultural boundaries and spoke to something universally understood. It was an image of harmony that seemed almost divinely orchestrated, evoking gasps and then absolute silence from the thousands watching. For 3 perfect heartbeats, time seemed suspended. Then, as if released from a spell, the audience erupted. People rose to their feet, applause thundering through the arena with an intensity that caused the ground to vibrate beneath Thunder's hooves. The Mustang's ears flicked at the sudden noise, but he remained steady, his trust in Miguel overriding his instinctive fear of the crowd's reaction. Miguel carefully lowered himself to a sitting position and then slid from Thunder's back, keeping one hand on the horse's neck in reassurance. The applause continued, washing over them in waves. Miguel glanced toward the Latino section of the audience, where entire families were on their feet, many with tears streaming down their faces. Children waved small Mexican flags. Elderly men removed their hats in respect. Mothers made the sign of the cross in blessing. Even in the VIP section, hardened ranchers and competitors were standing, some nodding in reluctant respect, others whispering urgently to companions. Henderson remained seated, his expression unreadable as he studied Thunder with recalculating eyes. When Miguel finally led Thunder toward the exit, they were intercepted by the rodeo director, his earlier condescension replaced by barely concealed excitement. "Mr. Ramirez," he said, conscious of the cameras now trained on them. "That was extraordinary. We'd like to announce a special award of excellence in natural horsemanship to recognize your remarkable demonstration today." Before Miguel could respond, Whitaker appeared at his side, positioning himself perfectly for the photographs being taken. "Ramirez has been developing this method at Whitaker Ranch," he announced smoothly to the gathering reporters. "We're very proud of his achievement." Miguel said nothing, focusing instead on Thunder, who had begun to show signs of tension at the growing crowd of strangers. He stroked the Mustang's neck in a steady rhythm, providing an anchor of familiarity amid the overwhelming stimuli. As they finally broke free of the crowd and reached the quiet of the preparation area, Whitaker pulled Miguel aside, his voice low and tight with contained emotion. "Ramirez," he said, struggling visibly with conflicting impulses of anger and opportunism. "You've proven your point. The horse is yours." Miguel studied the rancher's face, searching for deception. What he found was not a moral conversion, but a businessman's pragmatic calculation. The public relations value of generosity now outweighed the profit from selling Thunder to Henderson. "And," Whitaker continued, clearly uncomfortable but recognizing the inevitability of the moment, "I'd like to offer you supervision of a new program for traumatized horse rehabilitation at Whitaker Ranch." The crowd's continued applause filtered through from the arena, providing a soundtrack to this unexpected moment of negotiation. Miguel glanced at Thunder, at the Mustang's alert but calm demeanor despite the chaos surrounding them. Then he looked back at Whitaker, seeing clearly the calculation behind the offer, not compassion but opportunity, not respect but exploitation of a marketable skill. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Whitaker," Miguel replied calmly, his hand never leaving Thunder's neck. "But I have other plans for myself and Thunder." The words hung in the air between them like a declaration of independence. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Whitaker, but I have other plans for myself and Thunder." Miguel had never directly refused his employer before, had never placed his own desires above survival and compliance. The sensation was both terrifying and exhilarating. Whitaker's face hardened, the momentary magnanimity evaporating. "Don't be foolish, Ramirez. Where would you go? What would you do? You have no papers, no certification, no land." His voice lowered. "One phone call from me to certain authorities, and your 20 years in Texas disappear overnight." Thunder shifted position, placing himself slightly between Miguel and Whitaker. The Mustang's ears flicked back and forth, his dark eyes fixed on the rancher with wary assessment. Over the weeks, Thunder had developed an uncanny ability to read human intention, not just Miguel's gentle guidance, but the barely concealed hostilities and calculated interests of others. "I understand the risk, sir," Miguel replied, his hand steady on Thunder's neck. "But some choices are worth making regardless of consequences." Before Whitaker could respond, Marisol approached, her phone held aloft like a shield. "Miguel, the video of your performance is going viral. 3,000 shares already." She turned the screen toward them, showing the image of Miguel standing on Thunder's back, the white dove perched on his outstretched arm. "People are calling it the Freedom Dance." Whitaker's expression shifted once more, calculations visibly running behind his eyes. "We'll discuss this back at the ranch," he said finally. "This isn't the place." The return journey to Whitaker Ranch occurred in strained silence. Miguel rode in the trailer with Thunder as before, the Mustang unusually alert, as if sensing the precarious nature of their situation. Through the small window, Miguel could see Whitaker's expensive truck leading their modest convoy, the rancher's rigid posture visible even at a distance. "We'll find a way, amigo," Miguel murmured, stroking Thunder's flank. The horse nickered softly in response, pressing his head against Miguel's chest in what had become a gesture of mutual reassurance. When they arrived at the ranch, an unexpected sight greeted them. Several vehicles were parked near the main house, including a van bearing the logo of a local Spanish-language television station. Elena waited by the stables, her expression a mixture of concern and excitement. "What's happening?" Miguel asked as he guided Thunder down the trailer ramp. "News travels fast," Elena replied. "Reporter from Telemundo wants to interview you. Some lawyers from the Latino Legal Defense Fund, too. Even Padre Gonzalez is here." Whitaker emerged from his office, face tight with barely contained fury. "Ramirez, what is this circus? I didn't authorize any media on my property." "I didn't invite them, sir," Miguel answered truthfully. The reporter, a poised woman in her 30s whom Miguel recognized as Luisa Morales from the local Telemundo affiliate, approached with a cameraman in tow. "Mr. Ramirez, your performance today has touched thousands. Would you share the story of how you connected with this magnificent animal?" Whitaker moved to intercept, but Marisol was faster, positioning herself between the rancher and the camera. "Miguel's method is revolutionary," she said clearly. "He didn't break Thunder's spirit. He honored it. That's why people are responding so powerfully." Over the following days, Miguel found himself navigating unfamiliar terrain. The video of their performance continued spreading across social platforms, drawing attention from unexpected quarters. Horse enthusiasts from neighboring counties drove by the ranch, hoping to glimpse the Miracle Mustang and his Mexican trainer. Letters arrived from Latino children describing how the story had made them proud of their heritage. Whitaker, meanwhile, oscillated between attempting to capitalize on the unexpected publicity and containing what he clearly viewed as a threat to his authority. One morning, he summoned Miguel to his office, presenting a new contract even more restrictive than the first. "Exclusive rights to your method," Whitaker explained, tapping the document. "Your story, your image, everything packaged as Whitaker Ranch Authentic Mexican Horse Whispering. I'll handle marketing, booking, appearances." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "You just do what you do best, play guitar, and look authentic." Miguel glanced through the dense legal language, understanding enough to recognize the cage being constructed around him. "And Thunder?" "The horse stays here, of course. He's the centerpiece of the program." That afternoon, Miguel noticed an unfamiliar vehicle parked near the staff quarters, a green and white Border Patrol SUV. The agent inside appeared to be watching the stables with particular interest. "Not a coincidence," Elena muttered when Miguel mentioned it. "Someone's sending a message." As if to confirm her suspicion, Miguel spotted 2 more immigration officers at the local grocery store the following day, and another driving slowly past the ranch entrance the day after. The pattern was clear, a reminder of vulnerability, a barely veiled threat. Despite these pressures, Miguel continued working with Thunder, their bond deepening with each passing day. The Mustang now responded to dozens of subtle cues, a specific Spanish phrase for each movement, particular musical notes that signaled different gaits. More remarkably, Thunder began initiating interactions, suggesting through body language when he wanted to work or rest, expressing preferences that Miguel respected. "He's not just accepting training," Marisol observed as she continued documenting their progress. "He's participating in creating it." Joe Running Bear became a regular presence during their sessions, offering insights from his people's ancient horsemanship traditions. "In the old days," he explained one evening as they watched Thunder grazing peacefully, "a warrior's horse would warn of danger, find water in drought, carry its rider home when wounded, not from training but from choice. the choice to form a bond deeper than command. The paradox of their situation was not lost on Miguel. As his connection with Thunder reached new depths of understanding, the external pressures threatening to separate them intensified. Henderson continued calling with increasing offers. Immigration patrols became more frequent. Whitaker grew increasingly impatient for an answer regarding the contract. One afternoon, when Miguel was working with Thunder in the small paddock, Brady Wilson attempted to demonstrate his authority by entering with a training whip. Thunder, who had grown calmer around most humans, immediately recognized the threat posture and moved protectively toward Miguel. "Back off, Wilson," Miguel said firmly, no longer the deferential employee of months past. "He remembers how you treated him." Brady's face flushed with anger. "You forget your place, Ramirez. This is still Whitaker Ranch and you're still just a—" Thunder interrupted with a warning snort, advancing slightly toward Brady with ears pinned back. The trainer retreated hastily, his bravado deflating in the face of the Mustang's controlled display of boundary setting. That evening, Miguel found Marisol waiting by his trailer, her expression uncharacteristically serious. "I've been thinking," she said without preamble, "about what you said after the rodeo, about having other plans." She opened her laptop, showing Miguel a website she had created. Esperanza Sanctuary, read the header above pictures of Thunder and Miguel. Below was a crowdfunding campaign that had already raised several $1,000s. "People want to support what you're doing," Marisol explained. "Not just with Thunder, but for other traumatized horses, for children who need healing too." Miguel stared at the screen, at the numbers that represented not just money but belief in something he had never dared to imagine for himself, a future built on his own terms, using his gift to help others. "There's more," Marisol continued, lowering her voice. "Joe knows about some land in the hills near New Braunfels. Used to belong to Comanche allies before the white settlements. It's been abandoned for years, but there's water, good grazing. The current owner is willing to sell cheap." The idea was simultaneously terrifying and compelling. A vision of freedom not just for Thunder but for Miguel himself, a place where horses could heal and children could learn the language of gentle connection that his father had taught him. The following day, Elena's nephew Ramon, who worked as a paralegal at the Latino Legal Defense Fund, visited the ranch ostensibly to bring his aunt homemade tamales. While Elena created a diversion in the kitchen, Ramon spoke quietly with Miguel near the equipment shed. "We've been looking into your situation," he said, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. "There might be a way. The Cultural Contribution Visa. It's for individuals with unique skills that preserve and share cultural heritage. Your method with horses, the music, the traditional knowledge from your father, it qualifies, especially with all the media attention now." Miguel processed this information cautiously, years of living in the shadows, making him skeptical of any promised path to legitimacy. "Whitaker would have to support the application," he said. "He never would." Ramon smiled. "Not necessarily. If you can demonstrate independent means of support, community backing, and significant cultural contribution." He gestured toward the stable where Thunder was visible through the open door. That performance in San Antonio might have changed more than just how people see horse training. That night, a sudden thunderstorm swept across the ranch, lightning splitting the Texas sky with jagged brilliance. Miguel hurried to Thunder's stall, knowing how the Mustang still sometimes panicked during storms, the trauma of the forest fire embedded deep in his memory. He found Thunder agitated but not terrified, moving restlessly as rain hammered the stable roof. When a particularly close lightning strike illuminated the stall in harsh white light, Thunder whinnied anxiously, pressing close to Miguel. "I'm here," Miguel soothed, stroking the powerful neck. "We've weathered worse together, haven't we?" As they stood together in the storm-swept darkness, Miguel made his decision. The path forward was uncertain, fraught with risk, but the alternative, surrendering Thunder to Henderson, accepting Whitaker's exploitative contract, continuing to live in fear, was no longer tolerable. When morning broke clear and brilliant after the storm, Miguel found Elena waiting by the stables, a knowing look in her eyes. "You've decided," she said simply. Miguel nodded. If the community truly supports this sanctuary idea of Marisol's, they do, Elena assured him. Not just for Thunder, for you, for what you represent. As if to confirm her words, Padre Gonzalez arrived later that morning with several parishioners, bringing food and offers of help. The children at the church school are collecting donations, the priest explained. They've been drawing pictures of Thunder for an auction. That evening, as Miguel led Thunder to the paddock for their daily session, he noticed a familiar black SUV pulling up the ranch drive. Henderson emerged, carrying what appeared to be documents in a leather portfolio. No es coincidencia, Miguel murmured to Thunder. Not a coincidence. The Mustang's ears flicked forward, then back, sensing Miguel's tension. In response, Thunder moved slightly ahead, positioning himself between Miguel and the approaching visitor. A protective gesture that required no training, only the choice to stand with rather than against. That night, Miguel took his decision final. "We will not be anyone's property," he whispered to Thunder, while preparing a small backpack with his belongings, his father's guitar, and a last apple shared with the Mustang. Tomorrow at dawn, before Whitaker could stop them, they would leave together for the freedom they both deserved. The pre-dawn mist clung to the rolling Texas hills, shrouding Whitaker Ranch in ghostly gray as Miguel quietly led Thunder from his stall. The Mustang moved with deliberate silence, as if understanding the need for secrecy. Their breath formed small clouds in the cool morning air as they paused at the edge of the property. Miguel looking back one last time at the place that had been his home, though never truly his, for 20 years. "Vamos, amigo," Miguel whispered, his hand resting lightly on Thunder's neck. "Our path lies elsewhere now." They followed the fence line to a gap Miguel had discovered years ago, a place where the wire had sagged between posts, creating an opening just wide enough for them to pass through. The ranch dogs, usually alert to any movement, remained curiously silent, perhaps a final kindness from Elena, who Miguel suspected had slipped them extra food to keep them drowsy and content. Half a mile from the ranch, where an old oak tree marked the crossroads of two county highways, Elena waited with Ernesto's pickup truck, its engine idling quietly. Beside her stood Joe Running Bear, his weathered face solemn in the gathering dawn light. "Everything is ready," Elena said, embracing Miguel briefly. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Marisol and the others will meet us there." Thunder loaded into the trailer without hesitation, his trust in Miguel now absolute. The Mustang that once could not bear confinement now accepted the temporary restriction with patient dignity, understanding somehow that it was a necessary step toward greater freedom. As they drove away from Whitaker Ranch, Miguel felt a weight lifting from his shoulders, the burden of deference, of strategic invisibility, of constant calculation to ensure survival. Beside him in the passenger seat, Joe Running Bear gazed ahead, his silence companionable rather than empty. "My grandfather used to say that some places remember who belonged there first," Joe said finally as they turned onto the winding road leading into the hills. "This land we're going to, it remembers horses running free." The property appeared suddenly around a sharp bend. 30 acres of rolling meadows bordered by live oak and cedar, a small creek cutting through its heart. The dilapidated structures, a weathered farmhouse, a leaning barn, and several outbuildings in various states of disrepair, spoke of long abandonment. But Miguel saw beyond the current condition to the potential beneath. "It's not much," Joe acknowledged as they parked near the barn, "but it has good bones and good spirits." Thunder seemed to sense the significance of the moment. When Miguel opened the trailer door, the Mustang stepped down with careful deliberation, head high, nostrils flared as he absorbed the scents of this new place. His ears swiveled, taking in the different sounds: birdsong, wind through tall grass, the gentle gurgle of the creek. For several moments he stood absolutely still, processing this fresh reality. Then, with a soft nickering sound that seemed directed at Miguel, Thunder took his first steps onto the soil of what would become Esperanza Sanctuary. Throughout the morning, vehicles began arriving, Marisol with her laptop and organizational charts, Padre Gonzalez with several strong young men from his parish, families from the Latino community bearing tools, building materials, and food. By midday, a remarkable transformation was underway. Men reinforced fence posts and mended gaps in the barn roof. Women set up an impromptu kitchen in the shade of an old mesquite tree, the aroma of simmering beans and fresh tortillas filling the air. Miguel stood watching in stunned appreciation as this community, his community, came together with purpose and hope. Thunder remained close by, no longer tethered or contained, free to roam the property yet choosing to stay near the human activities, his curiosity overcoming ingrained wariness. "It's happening," Marisol said, appearing at Miguel's side. "We're already receiving small donations through the website. People believe in what you're doing." The first test of their newly formed sanctuary came sooner than expected. Shortly after noon, the sound of vehicles approaching silenced the busy activity. 2 police cruisers and Whitaker's luxury SUV pulled up to the property entrance, followed closely by Henderson's black vehicle. Thunder, grazing peacefully nearby, raised his head at the approaching engines, ears pricked forward in alert assessment. When Whitaker emerged from his vehicle, the Mustang's posture changed subtly. Not the panic of past encounters, but a controlled vigilance, muscles tensed for potential action. "Ramirez!" Whitaker called, striding toward Miguel with Sheriff Dawson at his side. "This has gone far enough. You've stolen my property and I want it returned immediately." The sheriff, a man Miguel had occasionally seen at community events but never spoken to, looked uncomfortable with his role. "Mr. Whitaker has filed a theft report," he explained. "Says the horse belongs to him." Miguel stood his ground, aware of the community members gathering behind him in silent support. "Thunder was going to be sold or destroyed before I worked with him," he said, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. "Mr. Whitaker himself said I could have him after the rodeo performance." "A verbal agreement under duress isn't binding," Henderson interjected, stepping forward with the confident posture of a man accustomed to legal maneuvering. "The animal represents a significant investment and remains legally Whitaker Ranch property." What happened next surprised everyone present. Thunder, who had been observing from a short distance, approached deliberately. The Mustang walked past the line of supporters and positioned himself directly beside Miguel, his powerful body a statement of choice and alliance that required no human language to interpret. Padre Gonzalez stepped forward. "Sheriff, this situation involves more than property law. It concerns moral principles our community holds dear: compassion, justice, and respect for life." Before the sheriff could respond, another vehicle arrived, a van bearing the Telemundo logo. Luisa Morales emerged with her camera operator, immediately sensing the dramatic confrontation unfolding. "Sheriff Dawson," she called, approaching with microphone in hand, "is it true you're here to seize the famous Thunder? The horse whose story has inspired thousands across Texas." The sheriff's expression shifted, the political animal in him recognizing the potential public relations disaster. With cameras rolling and dozens of community members watching, forcibly removing Thunder would cast a shadow no elected official wanted. "I'm just here to establish the facts," he said carefully. "No one's seizing anything until ownership is properly determined." Miguel saw the calculation in Whitaker's eyes. The rancher was realizing that the situation had spiraled beyond his control. What had begun as a simple property dispute had transformed into a community movement with media attention. "Let's be reasonable," Miguel said, addressing Whitaker directly. "You've already benefited from Thunder's story. The publicity for your ranch has been substantial." After tense negotiations under the Texas sun, with Luisa's camera documenting every moment, a compromise emerged. Miguel would relinquish any financial claims against Whitaker Ranch, and in exchange, Thunder would remain at the sanctuary. Whitaker, presenting himself as magnanimous for the cameras, even promised a modest donation to help preserve traditional horsemanship methods. As the official vehicles departed, the community erupted in celebration. Elena wiped tears from her weathered cheeks, while Marisol hugged her mother tightly. Joe Running Bear stood apart, a slight smile the only indication of his satisfaction with the outcome. Thunder, sensing the shift in energy, approached Miguel and pressed his muzzle gently against the man's chest, a gesture that had come to signify their unique bond, a connection transcending the traditional boundaries between human and horse. In the weeks that followed, Esperanza Sanctuary took shape with remarkable speed. Local contractors donated time and materials to repair the main buildings. Veterinary students from Texas A&M, inspired by Marisol's advocacy, offered free health checks for rescue animals. The County Agriculture Extension Office provided guidance on sustainable pasture management. The first rescue besides Thunder arrived on a rainy Tuesday, an Appaloosa with prominent ribs and dull eyes, abandoned when his elderly owner passed away. Miguel approached the traumatized animal with the same patient respect he had shown Thunder, sitting quietly near the stall for hours, sometimes playing guitar, sometimes simply existing in companionable silence. Thunder, remarkably, seemed to understand his role in this new dynamic. The Mustang would often stand near the Appaloosa's enclosure, modeling calm behavior, demonstrating through example that humans at this place could be trusted. Elena established a small cafeteria in the renovated farmhouse, serving traditional Mexican food to volunteers and visitors. The simple structure became a gathering place where stories were shared, where Latino elders taught children traditional songs, where the boundaries between formal education and cultural wisdom blurred. On a warm Saturday 6 months after their departure from Whitaker Ranch, Miguel stood on a small hill overlooking what had become a thriving sanctuary. 8 rescued horses now grazed in the pastures. The barn gleamed with fresh paint, its interior transformed into clean, spacious stalls. Most importantly, children's laughter filled the air as families participated in the sanctuary's educational programs. Sofia, who had released her dove Esperanza during that pivotal rodeo performance, now visited every weekend, her natural affinity for animals making her one of Miguel's most dedicated young helpers. The white dove had made its home in the barn rafters, sometimes descending to perch on Thunder's back in a living recreation of the image that had gone viral months before. "Señor Miguel," Sofia called, running up the hill to where he stood. Thunder showed the new children how to give carrots properly. He bent down so the little ones could reach. Miguel smiled, watching Thunder in the distance, the Mustang's coat gleaming in the afternoon sun, as small children gathered around him with appropriate caution and wonder. "That's because he remembers being afraid," Miguel explained, "and he doesn't want others to feel that fear." Padre Gonzalez joined them on the hilltop, his traditional black attire exchanged for more practical jeans and a work shirt on sanctuary days. "The lawyers called," he said quietly. "Your cultural contribution visa has been approved. The immigration hearing is just a formality now." Miguel nodded, emotion tightening his throat. After 20 years of shadows, of strategic invisibility, the prospect of legitimate presence seemed almost unreal. The official opening ceremony for Esperanza Sanctuary took place under a cloudless Texas sky, with over 200 community members in attendance. Joe Running Bear performed a traditional Comanche blessing, burning sacred herbs and offering prayers in his ancestral language. Padre Gonzalez followed with Catholic invocations that blended seamlessly with the indigenous ceremony, a harmonious recognition of the cultural threads woven into the sanctuary's foundation. As twilight descended, Miguel stood watching Thunder gallop freely with the other rescued horses, their movements fluid and joyful across land that welcomed their presence. Nearby, children from diverse backgrounds listened attentively as Elena explained how horses communicate through subtle body language. Sofia approached, her ever-present Esperanza perched on her shoulder. "Señor Miguel, how did you know Thunder would change your life?" she asked, her young face solemn with the weight of philosophical inquiry. Miguel smiled, touching the colorful woven band he still wore on his wrist, his grandmother's gift and a constant reminder of his roots and journey. "No sabía, pequeña," he answered gently. "I didn't know. I just recognized another broken soul like mine. And when broken souls meet and choose to trust each other, they become stronger together." In the distance, Thunder raised his head as if hearing his name, looking directly toward Miguel. With a soft, nickering call, the magnificent Mustang began trotting toward them, his scarred but powerful body moving with the grace of absolute freedom. As the fading sunlight gilded his black coat, Thunder approached Miguel and stopped, lowering his head in greeting, choosing once more, in complete liberty, to return to the man who had never tried to possess him.